Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Yasmina Greco. I'm with O'Reilly Media, and I will be your host for today's webcast. Today we have Chris Vander presenting How to Launch Better Software Faster. Chris is the author of the brand new O'Reilly book, Shipping Greatness, Practical Lessons on Building and Launching Outstanding Software, learned on the job at Google and Amazon. We are thrilled to have Chris with us today, folks, to present this webcast for you all. I will turn the program over to Chris in just a moment, but first I'd like to go over some housekeeping things to help you get the most out of today's webcast. You'll want to open the group chat widget if you haven't already done so. This is where we can interact with each other during the event and where you can submit your questions for Chris. We find that our audience usually has a lot of good knowledge to share, so we encourage you all to chat freely during the event. However, if you have questions for Chris, please preface them with a capital letter Q so we know that they're for him and we can make sure he sees them for Q&A. You can also open, move, and resize any of the other widgets. If you'd like to tweet from the Twitter widget today, you may need to give it permission to access your account. It will automatically append the event's hashtag to your tweet so you don't have to. And folks, today our hashtag is Better Software, all one word. If you should have any problems during the event, please take a look at the help widget. If you continue to have problems, please post it in the chat room and one of our staff will help you right away. For choppy audio or stalled visuals, please try refreshing your window. And remember, the best thing you can do for a good audio stream is to close any apps that could interfere. People always ask, so we'd like you to know we are recording today's webcast and we'll have an archive ready usually within 48 hours. And folks, at this time, it is my pleasure to turn the program over to Chris for his presentation. Hello, Chris.
Thank you, Yasmina. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Chris Vander, and as Yasmina said, I'm the author of Shipping Greatness. I'm really excited to be able to talk to you all today. Feel free to post questions in the group chat. I will try to work them in where I can. My plan is to spend about 30 minutes going over two major things that will help you build better products in less time. One is how to build better products by starting early. And the second is how to spend less time building those great products. So at the end of that, we'll do Q&A, and we can use the little Q&A feature, and we'll go from there. So without further ado, let me move on to the next slide here. Okay, so I want to give you just a tiny little bit about me. You've already heard about the book. I am currently the CEO of Scale Recognition, Inc., a venture-backed startup that focuses on helping developers recognize images, converting them from pictures of tech or pictures of people into understood faces and so forth. And I'm applying a lot of what is in the book to that business. I'll tell you about it. A lot of the lessons that I incorporate in the book and that we'll talk about today came from my experience as a senior product manager at Google, where I worked on products like Google Hangouts, which is something I shipped. I shipped the Google Apps Marketplace. I also did a bunch of work on Google Apps in general, led acquisitions there, and also even shipped some client software like the auto update system in Chrome and so forth. I also was an engineering manager at Amazon before that, where I shipped things like the Real Names product, built reputation systems, and so forth. So the lesson that I'm bringing in here and that I've tried to aggregate into Shipping Greatness came from really learning on the job at these businesses. I did a master's in engineering management at Dartmouth, and I was the CTO of a startup before this, and I had written software for many, many years. But what I found when I got into these very sophisticated, smart companies is that many of us were trying to figure out what to do as we went along, and that was inefficient. So I wanted to put it all together. So let's talk briefly about how to make better software. The answer is multifold, but one of the ways to start is by starting early, by putting the right components in place. You can make your software great to some extent before you even start writing it, before you even get to user interface mockups. And there are many different things you can focus on. I'm going to pick 3 of them today to talk to you about. So we won't talk about things like identifying core customer problems and so forth. These are critical, and in no way do I mean you should not focus on, finding the most essential customer problem or finding a really big problem or trying to solve the even harder problem that the user has. There's a bunch of stuff there. Rather, I want to try to give you 3 practical things that you can use and take back with you and try to focus on. So the first one that I'm going to give you, the first of these 3 ingredients to make a better product, is your mission. So this is kind of interesting. If you remember the movie Jerry Maguire, Tom Cruise is at the very beginning of the movie, he's all torn up inside because he wants things to be different. So he writes this mission statement, and it's 5 pages long, maybe it's 50. And he prints it all up. Says it's not a memo, it's a mission statement, and it's just so wrong. Okay? A mission statement is not 50 pages. A mission statement is directional, it is inspirational, and it needs to fit on a T-shirt. Now, I learned this at Amazon from a really amazing woman, Kim Rockmiller, who's a VP of Worldwide Discovery, and the idea behind a mission statement is not that it lays out everything that you're going to do, but rather it aligns your team to get the right thing done. And the reason why this is such a critical ingredient is because it helps everyone know where to go when you're not there. So if you're a lead engineer on a project and you have a relatively new college hire on the project, you want to enable that relatively inexperienced college hire engineer to make the right decisions on their own so that you don't have to micromanage, so that you don't have to go back and redo things and so forth. Similarly, if you're a product manager, there are so many people working on your product throughout the course of this process, designers, marketers, engineers, testing teams, that you need to help them make independent decisions and be as highly leveraged as they can be. And the way to do that is to make sure that the team understands where to go. And the best way to do that is with this notion of a mission statement. So I'll give you an example of how a great mission statement. The one that Kim Rockmiller, the VP of Worldwide Discovery that I mentioned, always held up was the personalization team at Amazon mission. And this is the team that tried to offer you things that were new to you on, the gateway of Amazon.com when you came in. Like you had bought cat food, so they would, advertise cat collars to you. And their mission was to enhance customer delight. And they loved this because it said where they were going to go, they were going to make more delight. Who they were going to focus on, they were going to focus on on the end customer. They weren't going to focus on systems and so forth. Those would be a byproduct. And delight was sort of the core thing. It was inspirational. It fit on a T-shirt. You could say to your team, so is this really going to delight users? Similarly, when I started Scaled Recognition, one of the first things I did, and this is me trying to live my own process, one of the first things I did was I said, what is our mission? And our mission was, I decided, in working with my co-founder, we agreed on this. And this is part of it. You've got to have your team agree on this. Our mission is to understand images. So when we started thinking about should we do voice recognition, because that's kind of very similar to what we were trying to do in text recognition, face recognition, we said no, because it's not about understanding images. So your mission constrains your problem space somewhat, but it also helps your team align and drive forward. So having a great clear mission will help your team build the right thing and move quickly. Okay, so that's your mission. Build a great mission statement, have it fit on a T-shirt, and you'll find that you'll be able to move. You'll be able to build a much better, more focused product. So we talked a bit about team. So why is team so critical? Well, obviously, if you've got a team full of ding-dongs, you're not going to get very far. And if your team has all decided to hate each other, well, you're not going to get very far either. So the reality is that a lot of your team is defined before you even get started. There's two core ways to address this. One is through hiring, and the second is through your own job selection. If you have the ability to hire, you have to be extremely careful to hire only the very best people that you can, and only people that you can trust and that you can trust to work independently. One of the most damaging things you can do, and you can imagine this, is to hire a leader who does the wrong thing, because you are going to empower that leader to be independent, to make decisions that have sweeping consequences. If you don't, there's no point in having that leader. So making the right hiring decisions are critical. Now, many of you probably are not in a hiring role, and hiring is a whole separate topic. And so the main point you're taking away is that if you are in a hiring role, that is one of the most important things you can do. If you're a manager of some kind, a good 25% of your time should be focused on your talent and hiring and how you can get the best people, and you should err on the side of not making mistakes. And you see this in companies like Google, where they pass over 10 qualified people for every one they hire. And they make it an extremely lofty and painful process. And it's extremely frustrating, actually, for the employees within the company who refer in people that they think are fantastic and highly talented and that they don't get hired. And it's not because those people aren't great. It's because the process is designed to try to eliminate mistakes. I can't say that it works perfectly, but at least the intent is good. So focusing on hiring the right people is important. Then if you are not a hirer, if you are not a hiring manager, focus on your own job selection. Choose teams that you love, that you can work with, and try to choose jobs where you have smaller teams, smaller projects. And that's counterintuitive, because most of us are trying to make our careers really big and significant. But if you choose to work with a smaller team, and a team that you feel like you can move quickly with, you might actually be able to get a lot more done, and it's results that tend to matter, and results that you recognize. Finally, as you look at the team, and you will generally have some sort of influence on the team, and in terms of whether, which manager you're going to work for, or who is going to join the team. But pay attention to having the right number of experienced players and inexperienced players. Too many inexperienced players will lead to too much randomization. Too many experienced players will lead to too much contention. So having one lead engineer for every one less experienced engineer is a great balance, because it establishes a mentoring relationship. And those are extraordinarily powerful and rewarding for everyone. So I would encourage you to try to have a role in. Okay, so we talked about having the right mission, and then getting the right team aligned with that mission, and some things you can do on the team to make sure that you hire only the very best. Choose the team that you work with very carefully, even if it seems like it's not the biggest opportunity, because it will make you much happier. And then having the right balance of experience versus less experienced players. So once you've done that, you need to put the right process in place. Again, this is something you can do from the very beginning. What is the right process? Well, let's talk about the wrong kind of process. If you have too much process, so where what I'm talking about is you have daily stand-up meetings that last 45 minutes, where everybody talks about how they feel and and what's going well and what's not going well. That's too much process, probably, because you're spending the whole team's time talking about things that don't necessarily move the ball forward. Okay? And that's going to mean that your team is going to get a little frustrated. If you have too little process and you have, say, no meetings, and you just rely on people to send email updates when they have something to announce, you may find that some of your team is moving in one direction and the rest of the team is moving in a completely different direction. So you can help solve some of that by having a really clear mission. But again, the mission is directional, not, a giant product plan. So there are going to be a series of decisions that can go either way. And if you have too little process, you won't be able to check in and checkpoint. So what you want is a hybrid there. The key is to have balance, and that's very hard. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, and I define a process within the book that you can follow. The other thing to note is that every team tends to build their own process, and the team has to be built. It has to really be integrated into it. You hear about things like the lean startup or agile and things like that. Well, these are wonderful frameworks for you to incorporate. As you bring them in, you want to start by erring on the side of too little process. What that's going to do is it's going to help you move quickly. It's going to help your team feel empowered. The engineers and the designers on your team will be, at least the engineers will probably be happier. Designers tend to, and forgive me if there are designers out there, but designers tend to want a little bit more process because they need visibility into what's happening, and that's totally appropriate. But you want to initially err on the side of too little, and then watch for oversight. And in an oversight would be something like, oh, we missed that whole class of bugs, or wow, the testing team didn't know that we were going to drop a build to test on Tuesday, and so therefore everybody got out of alignment. When you start noticing these oversights, that's when you want to start turning the knob up on your process and say, okay, so maybe we need a spreadsheet or something to help us organize our project. And so one of the things that I'll do is I'm actually going to use this little feature here. Let me see. I'll push a tiny little website to you. This is just a little collection of links, and the links there are some assets for you to use as you try to go through this. And they include a spreadsheet that's a very simple project management spreadsheet that you can use. The book talks about how to use it. You can also probably figure it out on your own. And what you'll find is that is probably the right amount of project management to do. So the right process will help you move forward more quickly, and it'll help you build the right product and get to the right decision. Some of the right process is also about how does the team make decisions together, and rationalizing at what stage each member of the team will have a voice and will be able to really articulate what they care about, where they can adjust and change various parts of the product, making it clear where that member of the team is going to be able to communicate, whether it's throughout the process or, okay, we're going to have a design document and then we'll do a design review. Making that clear and making that part of the process clear helps reassure the team, will help the team move together, and will also reduce some of the contention within the team that you always get when you have smart people working together to trying to create one thing when everybody had a slightly different idea in their head, even though they were aligned throughout the mission. So we've talked about mission, we've talked about how the teams can get together, and then we talked a little bit about how to have the right process. So let's move on to how to do this more quickly. Why does more quickly matter? The reality is that I remember Eric Schmidt saying right during the economic crisis that we had 4 or 5 years ago, saying that cash solves all problems. And I think that's basically true. You could look at the entire presidential election and say that if there had been a lot more cash going around, it would have been a very different election, a very different conversation. Why is this relevant? It's relevant because the faster you bring your product to market, the faster you will have revenue. In addition, the faster you bring your product to market, the faster you'll have real users using your product who are able to tell you that, it's not the right product or that it is the right product, and so you can adjust. What's also really important here, in addition to profit and getting real users to use it, is that progress is really key. It turns out that there have been studies that have shown that what really motivates employees is not their salaries. It turns out that information workers need to feel that they are paid fairly. But after they're paid fairly, what matters is progress. And so by moving quickly, you generate progress. And progress is super important in terms of people feeling actualized and in terms of people being happy, and a happy team is a healthy team. So let's move on to then what you can do to make your team, to get your product out there fast. The first thing is crisp communication. This is a crazy word, crisp communication, but what's funny about it is that it is a word that is used all the time within Amazon, and it's a word that was never used within Google and yet is believed in deeply. Let me tell you how deeply Amazon believes in the importance of communication. If you apply to be a people manager at Amazon nowadays, you're asked to deliver a writing sample. And this is not to ensure that, English is your first language or if English is your second language, that you're really good at it. The goal of this writing sample is to ensure that you can communicate an idea clearly and quickly. At the very highest levels in Amazon still uses one-pagers. When you go to present to Jeff, you're not allowed to bring a presentation like I'm showing you today. You have to bring a one-page document. And if you cannot communicate your complicated product plan and your roadmap or your problem in one page, you need to go back and work on it until it's one page. This is part of what crisp communication is about. The reason why this is so this is an example. So those are examples of why Amazon believes it, or examples to show that Amazon believes it's so important. Here's why it's so important. It's incredibly important because it generates less confusion. If I say the most important thing is for the user to sign up for our service, I have made a very clear statement that says, okay, now we know that the page is all about that one button, and we should make sure everything else is subservient to that one button. That means that we will spend less time iterating and going back and forth and saying, no, we didn't get it right. It also means I spent less time writing. So I wrote the most important thing that the user has to accomplish is signing up. I didn't say, well, there are 15 things we'd like the user to do, and here's the stack rank of them. And, I put this one at position 5 and the other one at position 7. The reality is that all those decisions are going to have to be made about what features, say, go on the home page. And somebody's going to have to make those prioritization decisions. But what's really critical when you're communicating to your team or to someone else is that you are very clear about and very efficient about what the essence is that has to happen and the specifics. You need to use real numbers. You need to, and you need to be as specific as possible. So there are some examples of how I talk about this in the book, and I'll give you some concrete ways we can do this. I talk a little bit about how to write email very clearly, and one of the ways is to use a technique that reporters have used for many years, and that's an inverted pyramid approach to your email. And that is, you start with the most important thing. So, for example, if the most important thing is that you have discovered that Apple is releasing an iPhone 6 that has an NFC chip, and you need your team to respond to that, then the most important thing is your first sentence. Apple is releasing an iPhone 6 with an NFC chip, and we need to change our software within a month. So, okay, great. That's the most important thing. From everything else, you're going to talk about the plan from there, and you go from most specific into broader. Another way to do this is to build what I call the deck in one slide. There's an example in that web page that I pushed to you. This is, instead of having a 10-slide presentation, just build a one-slide presentation. And in the one-slide presentation, the benefit is that when you're presenting and your audience starts going off the rails, they start asking random questions about different things, or they start rat-holing on one particular problem, you don't have to change the slides and go back and forth. You can just focus on the key elements, and the key messages will be delivered. And you can, if you can do this in one slide, you have this communication. The second, so we've talked about being able to communicate your complicated ideas in one page. And an example of that is, as part of the process that we talked about earlier, is writing a press release or a blog post before you get started. Those are one page long, and they clearly articulate what your product is going to be, what's essential about it, how to, and why users are going to care. And that's one page that's very crisp that your whole team can align and talk about whether or not it's aligned with your mission and so forth. Talked about the deck in one slide is another approach, and we talked about the inverted pyramid approach to writing email. I encourage you to consider trying all three of these. And generally, less is more, be more specific, and allow people to pull information, with the caveat that you should never hide your data. Generally, if you throw your data out there, it'll help back you up. Okay, so that's crisp communication. By communicating less and, by using fewer words more effectively, you can save your team time and you time. Okay, so number two, in terms of how to move faster. Don't fight every battle. Only fight the right battles. We can talk a lot about the Civil War, actually, at this point, and why it was the right battle, and why, actually, abolition of slavery was such a critical battle for Lincoln to fight in terms of turning the tide of the war. But let's just talk about our situation. Why is it important to fight only the right battles, and what are the right battles to fight? The reality is that everybody has an opinion, and if you spend all day long arguing with everybody's opinion, feeling like what's essential is that you get everybody to agree and get everybody onto the same page, you will be very, very tired. And you're going to spend a ton of your time arguing. The reality is that there are some things that are critical for the product that really will turn the tide. And there are other things where you may lose 1 day of engineering or 2 days of engineering or even 3 days of engineering. In some cases, when you look at I would encourage you to look at the consequences of that. I'm going to give you a concrete sort of cognitive behavioral therapy way of looking at this problem. Let's say that you're a snowboarder and you don't know whether or not you're really going to like this new snowboard that Burton released, but you're really pretty interested in it. You can spend days going back and forth and saying, oh, well, I'm going to spend $700 on the snowboard, and this will be a $700 decision. The reality is that you could probably take that snowboard out, try it a couple times, and sell it on eBay for $500. It's a $200 decision, not a $700 decision. Understand the true cost of a battle and of losing it. And if you can afford to lose the battle, lose it quickly and move on. Because you need to save your ammunition for the battles that matter, and you need to move forward as quickly as you can. If you are going to fight a battle, if you are going to try to get somebody to come around and align, try to do it in the best way possible, which is to bring your conversation back to goals, to what you're trying to accomplish. Don't make a discussion, a battle, an argument. Don't make it about you versus them. In fact, if you can send email without using the words you or I, just take your email, remove all the you and I from it, say the team or the product, or even better yet, remove you and I and replace you and I with the name of a persona if your team is using personas. You can say, the user, Jerry, feels that X or Y is true, therefore we should do Y or Z. You personalized it. I talk a lot about this in the book, and you made it about the product and user goal. This is a key theme from the Harvard Negotiation Project, Getting the Yes book. And I would really encourage you to read Getting the Yes. I think it's wonderful, and I think that it is the best no-nonsense negotiation approach. And getting people to focus on what the goal is rather than what the problem is aligns you well and will bring you back to your mission and will help you work as a team to drive towards that goal. And it will save you time because you won't spend you won't spend as much time being emotional. You'll spend more time being creative. Okay, so fighting the right battles will save you time by not spending your precious resources on battles that you don't need to fight or that would otherwise cost you time. And by fighting only the right battles, you'll also drive the right focus on the team, and that will be more efficient. The final thing of these three essential tips to moving faster is to spend wisely. What do I mean by that? It means spending your time. Your time is the most precious resource you have. You can always get more money. You can always get you can always get more information even. But frankly, Gordon Greco in Wall Street got it right. That time is the most precious resource. He says you want to go rich enough not to waste time. That's really meaningful. You can start being that rich today by asking yourself whether you need to spend time on a particular task. One of my favorite examples is when a colleague of mine at Amazon had a big presentation to do for a bunch of senior executives. And he sat down and said, crap, I have to do this presentation. And 30 minutes later, he stood up and he said, well, I guess I got to go do it now. I said, wait, you just spent 30 minutes on this presentation? He shrugged. He walked out. He came back 45 minutes later, and he sat down and spent the right amount of time on that presentation, by which he meant he walked in, got randomized, nothing changed, and as far as he was concerned, he spent 30 minutes to show that that he respected their time and was willing to come in and get some advice, and that he also was intelligent enough to know that he was probably just nothing really meaningful was going to happen. This was a situation where you couldn't just ignore the meeting. In another case, you could have said, well, do we have to have a meeting for this? Can we just do this over email? One of the examples of how to optimize this and to spend your time wisely is, I talk about this in the book, that one of the things you should build as part of your process is a frequently asked questions document. What this does is when people start asking you questions in email or in person, you write them down into a document, you answer them, you copy and paste it into the email, and you respond. The next time somebody emails you the same question, you just say, please see the FAQ, and you've saved yourself time. Okay, so you might be saying, well, this is all well and good, but what if nobody ever asked the question? Well, the great part about this is somebody had the question at one point in time, which probably means a user will have it, or somebody else will have it. So, within the company. And what's great about this is you've already done the work, and you can basically push this out. When you go to if you have a technical writing team, your technical writing team will absorb this frequently asked questions document and love it because it does so much of their work for them. It also helps you get your thoughts organized clearly and succinctly in a way that's very crisp. You may send that frequently asked question out, that response back to somebody and say, okay, well, here it is. And they'll say, I don't get why it's X or Z, whatever the answer is. And you can refine it and get it crisp and embed it and update it. And that way you're constantly iterating and coming up with great answers on why you should care, why users should care, or what the answer to the problem is. So building frequently asked question documents is one example of how you can spend your time efficiently. Another example is about focusing. Another way to do this is really by focusing meetings. If you're in a meeting and there's not an agenda, it's totally reasonable for you to ask for there to be an agenda. If you're in a meeting with a senior executive, right, and there's not an agenda and they're just rambling, it's a different situation. Good luck with that. Hopefully this doesn't happen to you very often, but there are situations where you can't drive things forward without being a jerk. I get it. But try to make your meetings as efficient as possible. That saves your team time, saves you time, and you spend it wisely. The same thing goes, when it comes to negotiation. You could easily, and I talk quite a bit in the book about negotiating on how to acquire companies and so forth. You can spend a ton of time going back and forth trying to get an extra 0.1% on some deal. I would strongly encourage you not to do it. 0.1% is not going to make a difference, but it's going to waste everybody's time, and it's going to slow you in terms of your time to market. So we've talked about three things here in terms of moving faster. Having really crisp communication, that'll save you the number of iterations that you have to do with your team. It will save you time in terms of writing, and it'll save people reading. And it'll also mean that if you're very crisp and coherent, there's a higher probability that people will even bother to read what you're writing, whether it's email or documents or whatever. Talk about fighting the right battle and spending your time appropriately on only things that are really critical and thinking of the right cost basis. Cost accounting is extremely hard, and if you can look at something and say, it's only costing one engineering day, let's try the experiment, or I'm going to let this man or woman discover it on his or her own, that's really meaningful. And then, when you can't, try not to treat it as a battle, but rather treat it as a way to get to reach a goal collectively. And finally, spend your own time as if it was your most valuable investment. Treat yourself as a venture capitalist, and you're investing in yourself. You only have so much money to spend, so you want to get the best return. So that's what I have. You can follow me at Shipping Chris. This is like the world's most brief, topic. I'm doing a talk in 2 days where I'm going to take an hour and a half and just work through part of the requirements definition process, which I talk about in the book. But these are very high-level concepts. I hope you took a couple of these ideas away to find them valuable, and maybe we'll go and take a couple of questions now. How does that sound? Yeah.
Great, Chris. Fantastic presentation. We do have several questions that have come in, as you can imagine. And real quick to let folks know, folks, we are at Q&A, so if you haven't opened your group chat widget, open it, type in your question for Chris so he can answer it while he's with us. And Chris, are you able to see the questions?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, great.
Okay. So let's see here. I guess I will. What order should I go here, Yasmina? I'll go in ascending order. So Henry has asked, can you talk a bit about the difference in process taken for internal software like business systems and tracking tools versus external customer-facing software? That's a great question, Henry. And to be honest, I think it is exactly the same. If your metrics may be a little different, for example, you might look at, how much money are we going to save, how much time are we going to save internally by building a tracking system versus when you're talking about an external product, you might look at how many ad impressions are we going to be able to serve. But at the end of the day, you still have an engineering team. You still have users. Your users are, the engineers who are using the tracking system or the product managers who are using the tracking system. There are some projects internally that one could consider infrastructure projects that are perhaps a little bit more traditionally project management based. And so an example of that would be if you were building out a data center. And that's something where it would be extremely capital intensive. You have to buy a lot of hardware. You have to deal with real estate, facilities, and so forth. In which case, you're doing it's not really a software project. It's a large-scale hardware project. But internally, in terms of software projects, I really believe that they are very, very similar. And so an example is, I worked on internally facing projects at Google, and I also, when I was at Amazon, one of the core things we did is we always talked about our APIs, because we knew that whatever we built as a customer-facing product would need to be consumed as a service within the company, because Amazon was so focused on having a service-oriented architecture. And that really meant that there was no line between internal and external products. Now, there's always a few products that the company builds internally that are not, treated with the same level of respect. And those things might be your accounting package or your hiring software or whatever. That's just unfortunate. It shouldn't be that way. So I think they're the same. It's the short answer. I should learn to be crisp. Okay, Michael Bernstein has a question. What is Scaled Recognition's mission statement? That's a good one. This one might have been asked before I got there. It is to understand images. And somebody commented in the chat, or somewhere else, that they didn't think it was particularly inspirational. I think that's fair. That's fair criticism. My co-founder and I at the time thought it was kind of inspirational. Understand images. What does that mean? Wow, it's kind of powerful to be able to take things that existed today, pictures of people or pictures of recipes, and turn them into valuable bits rather than just atoms, and be able to do things with them and operate on them. And so maybe we should manipulate our mission statement a little bit. But honestly, when it came down to spending time and spending our time efficiently, we said, does this seem roughly right? Is this roughly directional? Are we going to focus on images? Are we going to focus on understanding what they are and what they mean? Will it direct our investment, more or less? Yeah, okay. That sounds good enough for right now. And we left it at that. And the reality is that as we've gone out and we've talked to investors and venture capitalists, we've even said, look, our mission is to understand images. But then what we immediately go do is we start talking about specifically what the products are that we build and what our interfaces are like and so forth. And it's been great. It's worked very effectively for us. Okay. So let's see. What role does dress code play in fostering a professional and innovative working environment? That's a really interesting question. Well, I can tell you, I'll tell you a story. One of the most influential engineering directors at Google, who also is the site lead for a major engineering office and is one of the highest level people at Google and is brilliant and is responsible for all of Hangouts, which is a huge part of Google+. And has easily scoped over many hundreds of people, and he's a very, very, very sharp guy. Once showed up at a restaurant in Sweden, and they would not let him go in because he was wearing his business clothes. And his business clothes were sweatpants with stripes. And apparently the restaurant had a problem with the stripes. It wasn't so much the sweatpants, it was the stripes. I don't know why. It's a Swedish thing, I guess. I'm Swedish, and I love the Swedes. I don't understand what the deal is with the stripes. But the reality is that if this guy can show up, with his hair all bent out of shape, wearing a sweatpants, and still be one of the most successful, respected, and influential guys at Google, the reality is that it doesn't play a big role. Now, what does play a big role is treating your employees with respect, and treating your teammates with respect, and making sure that when people start acting disrespectfully or start being negative, that you stomp that out really quickly. I think one of the things that made this particular engineering director so successful is that he has a very deep understanding of how people work. And I talk about him in the book a little bit about how he helped me understand a little bit more about nuances in my communication with minorities, with women, and so forth. And he was willing to talk about this stuff in a nuanced way, and that's very, very important. That level of sensitivity is hugely meaningful. Dress code is just sort of what you look like. But I will give you one tip. The one tip is this. If you do a lot of video conferences, I did a lot of video conferences for a while. If you do a lot of video conferences, the quality of video conferences is generally not super great. Even if you use Hangouts, Hangouts are pretty great, but, even if you use Hangouts, keep a blazer in your, at your desk. So, you go to the video conference, toss on your blazer, you instantly look like $1,000. Nobody can tell you're wearing like your ratty old T-shirt that says, I heart toxic waste on it. And, they all think you dressed up. All you did was you put on your blazer's got soup stains or whatever on it. It's fine. Nobody can see the soup stains. So that's my one dress code tip. Okay. Hope that was practical. You recommend psychological profiling part of the recruitment process. Oof. Well, I don't really know what psychological profiling is. So I think the answer is no. What I do recommend as part of the recruitment process, as part of the hiring process, I am a huge believer in reference checks. I write quite a bit in the book about how to hire some of the best team. I've hired like the best people, and I talk about why I think that like market sizing questions, for example, are bad. Why brain teasers are bad. You see Microsoft do a lot of brain teasers. I think they're terrible. And here, I'll give you a brain teaser that I was actually given at Microsoft. Brain teaser is this. If you're sitting in a boat holding a rock, and you throw the rock into the lake, what happens to the level of water in the lake? Yes, I was actually given this question in an interview at Microsoft. They got it right. They made me an offer. I chose not to take the job. One of the reasons why is because I thought this was a silly way to evaluate whether I would be a good product guy. But what I think is meaningful is not those things. What I think is meaningful is reference checks. You can learn a tremendous amount from somebody about somebody by talking to their former bosses. You really got to insist on it. And this was really driven home for me in Ram Charan and Larry Brodsky's book, Execution. Actually, for me, really the key thing I took away from that whole tome was just check references. There you go. Do it yourself because people will tell you, they will be honest. They pretty much need to be because it's a small world and your reputation matters. And then I also believe that making sure that somebody's willing to get specific, willing to go to numbers, be able to be fluent with them, whether it's estimating and committing to numbers, is really important too. So using numbers, checking references, and communicate really clearly and crisply, very important. Let's see. That's what I've got for questions there. Are there any other questions that anybody would like to ask?
Chris, do you see a refresh button right above it to the right?
Oh, I do.
Yeah, if you click that, it should give you a fresh load.
There's so many more questions. Oh, this is wonderful. This is great. I'm going to take the first one off the top. 2 pizza meetings. Get the idea of this, but what if just choosing pizza toppings takes longer than choosing the pizza toppings takes longer than the meeting itself? Okay, so this, I don't know. Maybe there are people out there laughing, but I got to tell you, Simon's got like a valid point. Okay, the valid point here is, you can't. What do you do if you're like the guy who's trying to organize this stuff and your team is perseverating? At what point do you pull the executive switch and just make it happen? And the answer is you pull the executive switch when you know you're not going to fundamentally piss off somebody. So as long as, if you've got somebody on your team that has a peanut allergy and you order a peanut pizza, that's a mistake. Okay, don't do that. They will die. So, and if you order peanut pizza anyway, it's probably a mistake. So, but the meta point here is if you know your team well enough to know what they care about, what they're passionate about, figure that out. If you don't know that already, go solve that problem before buying them pizza. And then just execute and buy them pizza. Just make it happen. The issue is that you will spend too much time trying to figure out what the right pizza is, and you'll waste your own time. But if you just order a few pizzas and you get one extra pizza that nobody eats, you put it out in the hallway, it's going to disappear. I don't know, people eat pizza that you leave in the hallway. It happens. It happens tons of times at Amazon. And really, for what it's worth, the notion behind the two pizza teams at Amazon was about keeping the team small enough to be nimble. Smaller teams were better, was the thought. And I think that's still really meaningful. Okay. How important is it that a team eat? This is a question from Michael Bernstein again. Hi, Michael. I need to know you guys. How important is it that a team eat its own dog food? And if important, how to apply that to an enterprise product? Okay. It is incredibly important. There are a few things that are more important. Eating your own dog food is really hard because it's tough to get people within an enterprise, right? As Michael is indicating, it's tough to get people to dog food. They don't necessarily want to because odds are good that when you start, your software will not be as good as what they're using today. So you will have to incentivize them, and I recommend both the carrot and the stick. You can give them a carrot. One way to give them a carrot is what you might have heard about this in the press. Last year, Google gave all the employees Nexus phones, Galaxy Nexus phones, because they wanted everybody to be dog fooding Android. It was great. It was motivational. It's pretty expensive. Company was rich, so they could do that. But that helps, right? Reducing the barriers to getting people to do it is important. And then making sure that whoever the senior leaders are constantly hammering the notion home that you must be dog fooding to the point where you take the old solutions off the table is very important. So come up with ways to use these products. For example, at Google, we dog fooded Google Apps completely. And one of the ways we did that is by eliminating all of the installs of Office from new computers. So you wanted to build a PowerPoint deck, you couldn't. You had to go and get it. You had to go to the IT guys and say, can I please have a copy of Microsoft Office? And say, well, what do you need it for? And you say, listen, I'm using, the presentation stuff, but I have to do this presentation for, CAD, and I need these animations. We don't do animations. Can you please do it? Okay, that's fine. So they built systems in there to drive it, and I think you need to do that. It is challenging if you're building something like recruiting software, and you can't. It's going to be very hard for your whole business to use a recruiting software if it's only intended for 3 or 4 people. Okay, figure out a way to get to do usability testing with your internal employees. You can do that. A lot of usability testing at these companies starts with employees who just aren't that familiar with it. Find somebody from customer support to try it, or find somebody from engineering to try it. They'll tell you things that a pro user like a recruiter wouldn't necessarily find. Okay. Let's see here. I'm going to go back down the list. Does a manager need to be a good coder? Surely a good coder needs to be a good coder, a manager a good manager. Yes, I think that's true. A good coder needs to be a good coder, a manager needs to be a good manager. I think this is an interesting question. If you're an engineering manager, the reality is that you will not get hired at Amazon or Microsoft if you can't write good code on the board. There is in the software industry, it's a little bit of I would sort of say it's a little bit of a kind of macho industry in the respect that you get respect by being able to be the toughest guy. So an example would be be the toughest at your job. So an example would be the commander of the troop of forces gets respect by being able to beat up anybody else in the force. It's the simplest possible way to do it is by being the toughest guy out of a group of 20 guys. Okay, so you lead, sort of alpha male. This is not a great way to do things, but it is true that it does happen this way sometimes. The reality is you must be deeply technical. You must be able to understand systems. You must be able to understand how scaling works. You don't necessarily need to be able to write the most beautiful code and execute at a very deep level. But it would be great if you can contribute to your team during the late stages of the process by writing some unit tests. You'll understand how things work. You'll add value. It's really meaningful. Yeah, I do think it's important that you need to be able to write code. Let me see if I can pick up something else. So Shaji Nathan writes, can you briefly outline the steps and best practices you go through to create, arrive at a minimum viable product? The answer is I don't think I can do it briefly. But I think that what I would give you is the criterion for minimally viable. And the answer is, does it improve the user's life at all? If it improves the user's life at all, it's good. It's helpful. And you might be laughing at this or saying that's just silliness, but I had one of my friends who's a product manager at a major company, went in there, joined up with this major company, and the engineering team said, well, we don't, can we ship it? And we think there's a lot more to do. And he said, well, is it better than what we have now? And they said, well, yeah, it's a little bit better. I said, well, ship it. Of course, it's a little bit better. So short answer is, if it's a little bit better, get it out there. And when it's brand new, you have to ask yourself the question, what is it that we need to test? What is it that we need to evaluate? What is it that we're trying to figure out? And from that will tell you what the minimum thing is that you need to have. Okay. See, I got maybe two more questions. Does the one slide per page risk lacking detail, though? Just giving a very basic overview, which doesn't dig deep enough to cover the problems that 2 or 3 pages make up. Okay. So Simon is making the point that you cannot possibly cover, a 60-page requirements document in a one slide deck. And Simon is exactly right. What you need to do is you need to deliver the essential message. And you can only deliver, this is the problem, you can really only deliver one message in a 30-minute presentation. And the reason for this is that presentation starts 5 minutes late. You're going to spend 5 minutes at the end covering what you already covered. So that's 10 minutes already off, so now you're down to 20 minutes. You got 5 minutes of randomization where somebody's confused. So now you got 15 minutes to get stuff across. Okay, so you got 15 minutes of which you're going to try to explain something to somebody and get them to make a change. Now, maybe it's just a status update, in which case, okay, you've got to figure out what the essential parts of the status update are for them to know. But if you need guidance from somebody, or if you need them to buy into a plan, like you need them to agree to buy, this company, or you need them to say, yes, you're funded, or whatever, you got to do that in 15 minutes. That means that you've got to have it down to just the core essence of what it is. You've got to figure out what their objections are going to be. You've got to figure out why what you're doing is so much more important than those objections, and you've got to distill it down. And if you can't distill it down to one slide, you've got to keep working on it. Because what's going to happen is you'll go in there and you'll say, okay, well, first of all, here are 6 things you have to understand. And boom, people's eyes glaze over and they're like, forget about it. I can keep maybe 2 things in my head at once. And these are very smart people who do nothing but listen to presentations all day long. But if you come in and you say, well, here's the thing. There is a fundamental market shift towards mobile. The data says that 30% of Google's revenues are now about mobile advertising. Our problem is that we don't have a mobile product. Okay, do we all agree that we don't have a mobile product and that there's clearly an opportunity in there because 30% of Google revenues are advertising? Great. Okay, our mobile product is, the cat finder. It's going to show you pictures of funny little cats. Great. Now we talk about whether that's the thing. That's the level of conversation you're having at sort of that second month slide. Okay, I would love to answer more questions. You should feel free to, tweet. Feel free to ask questions on the Facebook page. You can, I'll use this final opportunity to, I'll tell you that you can find me at facebook.com/shipgreatness. I really enjoyed this today, and it's been wonderful. Yasmina, do you have anything else you want to add?
Great webcast. Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing all your knowledge and expertise with us. Folks that attended, thank you so much for attending today. We hope you've benefited from the event. And those of you that sent in questions, thank you so much for those questions, because having those questions just adds that much more to our events. We would like to let you all know Chris's book, Shipping Greatness, brand new book just released, is the O'Reilly deal of the day. And what that means for you is you can get it today and save a lot of money as a thank you for attending the webcast. We have pushed out a code to you all in a URL in your group chat with details on that. So if you didn't open the group chat, please do. Good information there for you to save you some money. Or you can always visit O'Reilly.com. Look on the right-hand side. You can't miss it. Shipping Greatness book right there. Again, we thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone. This will conclude today's webcast. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.